The pounding on the door came on the 7th night of the blackout, hard enough that Joanne Merrick could hear it even from behind the false chimney wall where she stood surrounded by shelves of preserved food that everyone in Grafton, Nebraska assumed didn't exist. For a moment she didn't move, just listened to the desperate rhythm of fists against wood while lantern light flickered across rows of canned vegetables she'd spent 2 years quietly putting away. Then came a voice she recognized immediately. Carol Brenner from 3 houses down. The same woman who'd stood in the church parking lot 6 months earlier and laughed loud enough for half the congregation to hear when someone mentioned Joanne's ridiculous hoarding problem. Now Carol was outside in January wind that could strip skin, begging for help Joanne had prepared while everyone else had mocked her. It had started 18 months before the blackout, though nobody in Grafton noticed at first because Joanne Merrick had always been the kind of woman people saw without really looking at. 51 years old, widowed for 3, living alone in the 2-story brick house her husband built before cancer took him. She worked part-time at the county library, kept her yard neat, attended church on Sundays, and spoke only when spoken to. The kind of neighbor people found pleasant but forgettable. Until the day Danny Ortiz drove his lumber truck up her driveway and started unloading materials nobody could explain. "She's building something inside," Danny mentioned at the gas station that afternoon, accepting coffee from the clerk. "Had me stack 2x4s in drywall in her living room. Wouldn't say what for." By evening, half of Grafton had heard some version of the story. By Sunday, it had become the subject of parking lot speculation after services let out. "Maybe she's finishing the basement," someone suggested. "House doesn't have a basement," another corrected. "Built on slab foundation." Carol Brenner, who considered herself Grafton's social coordinator despite no official title, made it her business to find out. She appeared on Joanne's porch 3 days later carrying a casserole she'd clearly made as an excuse. "Heard you're doing some remodeling," Carol said brightly when Joanne answered. "Thought you might need a home-cooked meal while your kitchen's torn up." Joanne accepted the dish with quiet thanks, but didn't invite her inside. "Kitchen's fine. Just making some adjustments to the living room." "Oh." Carol leaned slightly, trying to see past Joanne's shoulder. "What kind of adjustments?" "Nothing complicated." Joanne's voice stayed level, polite, final. "Thank you for the casserole." The door closed before Carol could ask anything else. That refusal to explain became the thing that turned curiosity into something sharper. Because in a town like Grafton, where everyone knew everyone's business, silence itself felt like an insult. What Joanne was building, hidden behind closed curtains and locked doors, was a false wall that would run floor to ceiling across her living room's north side, positioned directly in front of the home's original brick chimney. The chimney hadn't worked in years, flue damaged, cap missing, but from outside it still looked functional. That was what mattered. She worked alone, measuring twice, cutting carefully, building a frame that left exactly 3 feet of space between the new wall and the old chimney. Then she drywalled it, textured it, painted it to match the rest of the room, and mounted a bookshelf against it so naturally that anyone glancing inside would see nothing unusual. Just another wall in an ordinary house. But behind that wall, accessible only through a section of bookshelf that swung outward on hidden hinges, Joanne created something else entirely. A narrow pantry stretching 14 feet long, lined with industrial shelving she'd ordered through 3 different suppliers so nobody local would notice the quantity. She installed battery-powered LED strips along the ceiling for light. She added a small dehumidifier that ran off a concealed power strip. She made the space functional, climate-controlled, invisible. Then she began filling it. Not all at once. That would have been noticed immediately. Instead, she drove to different towns, Grand Island, Kearney, sometimes as far as Lincoln, buying in small quantities from multiple stores. Canned vegetables, dried beans, rice in 20-pound bags, flour, sugar, salt, cooking oil, powdered milk, preserved meat, batteries, candles, matches, medical supplies, water purification tablets. Month after month, she carried bags inside under cover of darkness, unpacked them behind the false wall, and arranged them with the same quiet precision she brought to shelving library books. By winter, the hidden pantry held enough food to sustain 1 person for 18 months, maybe 2 people for 9. And nobody in Grafton knew it existed. Except they knew something was different about Joanne Merrick. They saw it in the way she stopped attending church socials, in how she declined invitations to book club and quilting circle, in the fact that her grocery cart at the local store carried only fresh produce and milk now, nothing that looked like real shopping. She's getting it somewhere else, Carol announced at the diner one morning, probably buying in bulk from one of those survivalist catalogs, building herself a bunker or something. Laughter rippled through the booth. Joanne Merrick? Someone said. She can barely change a light bulb. I'm serious, Carol insisted. Something's not right there. But not right wasn't the same as worth worrying about. So Grafton returned to its rhythms and forgot about Joanne's walls. Until the cold front arrived. The weather forecast had called it an Arctic Express, a massive Canadian air dropping straight down through the Dakotas with wind chills approaching 60 below. Grafton's mayor issued a shelter-in-place advisory, but nobody worried much. Power company said the grid was winterized. Propane suppliers promised deliveries would continue. This was Nebraska. Cold happened. Then on the second night, transformers started failing. Not dramatically, just a flicker, a pause. Then darkness spreading block by block as equipment froze and safety systems shut down to prevent fires. By morning, 3/4 of Grafton had no electricity. By afternoon, the propane trucks couldn't get through because highway crews had abandoned snowplow routes when their equipment stopped working in the extreme temperatures. Joanne had been watching forecasts for 2 weeks. She'd filled every pot and container with water the day before the cold arrived. She'd moved blankets to the living room, positioned candles strategically, checked the seals on every window. And when the power died at 2:17 in the morning, she simply lit a kerosene lamp and continued reading. Behind the false wall, her hidden pantry waited. Across town, panic built slowly then all at once. Furnaces died. Backup generators ran through their fuel. Pipes froze solid inside walls. The grocery store, already understocked because delivery trucks couldn't run, sold out of everything shelf-stable within 4 hours of opening. By the third day, people were burning furniture to stay warm. Carol Brenner's house lost power on day 1. Her propane ran out on day 4. By day 6, indoor temperatures had dropped below 40 degrees, and her husband's cough had turned into something that rattled wetly in his chest. "We need to find someplace warm," she told him, voice shaking. "Someone has to have heat." They tried the church, locked and frozen. The community center, same. The school, already sheltering 50 people with no food and failing generators. Everywhere they turned, they found cold and desperation. Then Carol remembered something. A detail she'd dismissed months ago. Joanne Merrick's truck, parked outside the library, running for 20 minutes in the parking lot one morning. Carol had assumed she was being wasteful. Now she wondered if Joanne had been warming up after a long drive. A supply run maybe. "That woman's been preparing for this," Carol said suddenly. "I know she has." Her husband looked doubtful. "Joanne, she's just a librarian." "Exactly. Quiet. Private. The kind of person who'd see something coming and not tell anyone." Carol was already pulling on layers. "We're going there." The walk took 40 minutes through wind that turned their faces numb. When they finally reached Joanne's house, Carol noticed something that confirmed everything. A thin line of warmth escaping from the kitchen window. Not the fading residual heat of a dead furnace, but active, consistent warmth. She pounded on the door. Inside, Joanne stood very still. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had rehearsed different versions of it. Now that it was here, she felt something unexpected. Not anger at Carol's past cruelty, but a heavy sadness at what desperation revealed about people. She opened the door. Carol and her husband stood there, ice crusted on their coats, faces raw from wind. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Carol's composure cracked. "Please," she whispered. "Tom's sick. We haven't had heat in days. I know you have something. I don't know how, but I know you do." Joanne looked at Tom, saw the flush of fever on his cheeks, heard the rattle in his breathing, made her decision. "Come inside." The warmth hit them immediately. Not blazing, but steady. The kind that came from kerosene heaters positioned carefully around the living room. Carol's eyes swept the space, searching for the source of Joanne's preparedness, but everything looked ordinary. Modest furniture. Books. A kitchen table set for one. "Sit," Joanne said, guiding Tom to the couch. She disappeared into the kitchen, returned with hot tea and soup that couldn't have come from any store in Grafton because those shelves had been empty for days. Carol watched her own hands shake as she held the warm mug. How do you have food? I planned ahead. But where? Carol stopped, understanding dawning. You've been stockpiling. For how long? Long enough. Joanne sat across from them. The signs were there. Grid failures in Texas. Supply chain problems. Extreme weather patterns. I just paid attention. Tom sipped the soup, color slowly returning to his face. Why didn't you tell anyone? Joanne's expression didn't change. Would you have listened? Silence answered her. Over the next hour, as Tom warmed and his breathing eased, the reality of Grafton's situation became clear through the battery radio Joanne kept running. Roads impassable. No rescue timeline. Hospitals overwhelmed. The cold front stalled instead of moving through. How long can you sustain this? Carol asked quietly, gesturing at the warmth, the food, the stability. Joanne didn't answer directly. I can help Tom tonight. Get his fever down. But there are others worse off. The Kowalskis, Carol said immediately. They have a baby. No heat since day 2. Joanne nodded slowly. Then she stood, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled 3 specific volumes in sequence. The entire section swung outward. Carol gasped. Behind the false wall, lit by soft LED strips, stretched a pantry that looked like it belonged in a fallout shelter. Rows of canned goods, organized by type. Bins of rice and beans. Medical supplies in labeled containers. Batteries stacked in neat pyramids. Water jugs. Blankets. Everything anyone might need to outlast a crisis nobody believed would come. Carol stood frozen in the doorway. My God, you built this whole thing. 18 months ago. Joanne was already pulling supplies. Infant formula, canned milk, blankets, a small camp stove with fuel canisters. I need you to take these to the Kowalskis. Don't tell them where it came from. Just say the church had emergency supplies. Why lie? Joanne looked at her steadily. Because once people know what I have, this stops being about helping and starts being about taking. Carol wanted to argue, but couldn't. She'd seen the desperation in town, knew what fear did to people. Over the next 3 days, Joanne became an invisible supply line. Carol and Tom acted as intermediaries, distributing food and fuel to families with children, elderly residents, anyone medically vulnerable. Always with vague stories about church supplies or county assistance. Never mentioning Joanne's name. But secrets don't hold in small towns. On the 10th night, Joanne's door shook with pounding again, not desperate this time, but angry. She opened it to find Wade Patterson, who owned the implement dealership, with 4 other men behind him. We know what you're hiding, Wade said flatly. And we need it. Joanne didn't step back. I've been helping. Carol's been distributing, not enough. My kids are hungry. Bill's grandma is freezing. You've got a whole stockpile in there while the rest of us suffer. I offered to share what I could safely. Safely? Wade's voice rose. Who made you queen of rationing? For a moment, Joanne felt the old instinct to retreat, to apologize, to make herself smaller. Then she thought of the 2 years she'd spent preparing while these same men joked about her paranoia. The money she'd saved buying supplies instead of eating out. The weekends spent building and organizing while they watched football. I did, she said quietly, when I was the only one paying attention. Wade moved forward. Joanne pulled a small canister from her pocket. Pepper spray, and Wade stopped. You can take what I have, Joanne continued, voice steady now. Break in here and empty my pantry in one night. Feed your families for maybe a week. Then what? When it runs out and the roads are still closed, what then? Nobody answered. Or, she continued, you let me manage what I've built. Let me ration it properly so it lasts until help arrives. Let me keep some people alive instead of everyone hungry. The standoff held for a long moment. Then Bill, the oldest of the group, stepped back. She's right. We panic now, we die later. Slowly, the others followed. The blackout lasted 14 days total. Joanne's hidden pantry, carefully rationed, kept 23 people from starvation and provided fuel that probably saved 6 lives. When power finally returned and supply trucks rolled back into Grafton, the town looked like it had aged a decade, buildings damaged, people exhausted, trust in systems permanently shaken. But Joanne's house stood unchanged. The false wall remained. The pantry, though depleted, was already being restocked through her quiet supply runs. 3 months later, Carol appeared on her porch again, not with casserole this time, but with plans. I want to build one. A hidden pantry. Will you help me? Joanne looked at her for a long moment. Why should I? Carol met her eyes. Because I was wrong. About you. About preparedness. About what matters when everything fails. She paused. And because next time, I want to be someone who helps instead of someone who begs. Joanne studied her, weighing sincerity against memory, then nodded once. Over the following year, 5 families in Grafton built hidden storage. Not bunkers. Not obsessive hoarding. Just quiet preparation. Joanne helped each one, teaching them what she'd learned about organization, rotation, rationing. The town never spoke openly about it. That wasn't Grafton's way, but the change was there. And sometimes, late at night when she was restocking her shelves behind the false wall, Joanne thought about that moment when Carol had pounded on her door. How close she'd come to not answering. How easy it would have been to let anger make her cruel. But she learned something her husband used to say, back before the cancer. Being right doesn't matter if you're alone when it counts. So she'd opened the door, and kept opening it, again and again, until the crisis passed. The pantry remained her secret, hidden behind the chimney that didn't work. But its purpose had changed. Not just survival, but proof that preparation wasn't paranoia. That paying attention while others looked away wasn't madness. It was the difference between enduring disaster and being destroyed by it. And in Grafton, Nebraska, nobody laughed at that anymore.